At the top, you have your standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. A, b, and c represent the numerical values in the quadratic equation. A is always attached to the squared term, b is always attached to the linear term, and c will always be your constant. So yesterday we solved by factoring. Today we're going to solve by the quadratic formula, which is right here, and you should have that on your notes too. I'll get up in just a little bit. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I forget about you guys sometimes, I'm sorry. So there's a bunch of YouTube videos. The one that was linked there doesn't work anymore, but it goes to Pop Goes the Weasel, so it sounds like this.
The quadratic formula's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
Not really sure what the point of the animal is on the bottom. I guess it's a weasel, huh? And then there's this other one. This guy made one to the One Direction
song. The first
song.
thing about the quadratic formula is what we're actually doing. The first part is when we have a quadratic function, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. We have a quadratic function set equal to 0. We're using the quadratic function of negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a to find where the function crosses the x-axis or the function is equal to 0. Okay? So there's a tune that pretty much everyone knows by One Direction that we will use to memorize this formula. Okay? You're all welcome to sing along if you know the tune. Get out, get out of my head. Fall into my arms and take me stand. I don't know what it is, but I need that one thing. You got that one thing. Good. So if we use that same chorus, we can sing the quadratic formula right here behind me. Negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now you know the quadratic formula. Now you know the quadratic formula. So that's how it goes. Let's do it one more time. Make sure we have it.
Okay, so those are just different videos so that you can know the quadratic formula, because you have to know it, you have to have it memorized, you're going to use it next year, you're going to use it the year after that, and the year after that. There's a bunch of them. There's one to Taylor Swift's Shake It Off and all that good stuff. Absolutely. Yeah. This negative b, in both songs they say negative b, which is how I always learned it and refer to it. The negative sign out front, though, means the opposite of b. So if b is a negative value to begin with, when you put it out in front, it becomes positive then. So the negative b is actually referring to the opposite of b. We're just going to practice some. So number 1, 7x squared plus 6x minus 1 equals 0. I said this yesterday. You have to make sure your quadratic equations are set equal to 0 to begin with. Yesterday's worksheet, they were all. Today's, they are not. So that's the first thing you want to check, is if it's equal to 0. And then you find your a, b, and c term. 1 is equal to 0. This first one is. So I'm just going to find my a, b, and c term. What's my a value of this equation? Just the 7. It's just the numerical value. Yep. B would be 6, and then c is -1. Good. After you find your a, b, and c values, it's substituting. You're substituting those 3 numbers in where you see them in the quadratic formula. So you have yours typed on your notes. It starts by saying x equals negative b, or the opposite of b. So we're going to put -6 out front. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times 7 times negative 1. So I put my a and my c in there. All over 2a. I want to see that step of work. I want to see what a, b, and c values you plug in. The next step comes from your calculator, so if you don't have it, get it out, because you want it out. And what we're going to do is punch in what's called the discriminant. But it's the part that's underneath the square root symbol. So we're just going to put that stuff into your calculator to see what it simplifies to. So 6 squared minus 4 times 7 times negative 1. You get 64. Okay. You always want that discriminant to be positive. If when you put it in your calculator and you get a negative number, you either punched it in wrong or you put an A, B, or C in the wrong spot. But that value should always come out positive. This is the second step of work I want to see. I want to see that discriminant simplified. So instead of having all that I highlighted it, I'm going to just put 64 in there. And then simplify your denominator. 2 times 7 is 14. Quadratics get their names because they have a squared term. That's their highest power. That highest power tells you how many answers you'll have. You'll get 2 answers still today. They come from this little plus and minus right here. One time you add the square root symbol, and then the second time you subtract it. So your first one, negative 6 plus 8, right, because the square root of 64 is 8, divided by 14. Simplify that. What's negative 6 plus 8? And then over 14 would become 1/7. Okay. The second answer is negative 6 minus 8 all over 14. And negative 6 minus 8 would be negative 14 divided by 14 gives you negative 1. Bless you. Questions on that first one? You're always simplifying, yep. They're not always going to come out to whole numbers or fractions, though. Sometimes they're going to come out to really ugly decimals because this may not always be a perfect square. You might get like the square root of 65 in there. If they don't come out to nice decimals or whole numbers, then round them to the hundredth. You might want to write that on there. Round them to 2 decimal places because they're not all going to be nice numbers. So let's try number 2 here. First thing, you want to make sure it's set equal to 0. Are we there? Okay. What's my A value then? Negative 3. How about my B value? And my C value? Good. Once you identify that, you just have to correctly substitute in. So x equals negative b, or the opposite of b. You're going to put a positive 5 out front. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Double check that you have that for your first line of work. Then you can take your calculator and put that discriminant value in there. You have to be careful here. If I put negative 5 squared in my calculator, what do we want to get out? Right. But what did it give me? Negative 25. If you're going to square a negative number, you have to make sure you use parentheses. Because when I type it in how I just did, the calculator is thinking negative 1 times 5 squared. And the order of operation says do your exponents first and then multiply by negative 5. So if you're going to you're going to square a negative number, You need to make sure you put that negative number in parentheses first and then square it so it comes out positive. That's weird. So when I put it all in the discriminant, I think I know why I put negative 5 squared minus 4 times negative 3 times negative 1. I got 13. Did you get 13? Okay. So then your next line of work I want you to write down is 5 plus or minus the square root of 13 all over negative 6. And your two answers come from when you add, so 5 plus the square root of 13 divided by negative 6, and then when you subtract the square root. So these are the two different things you have to put in the calculator. 5 plus second square root 13 divided by negative 6. I got negative 1.43 for that first one. If you didn't, try it again and see what. You gotta make sure you know how to use your calculator. And I got about negative 0.23 for the other one. Let me know if you're not getting these so you know how to use your calculator. When they come out as really ugly decimals like this, it means we wouldn't have been able to factor it into two parentheses. If they come out as nice whole numbers like 4 and 2, which some of them might, it means it could have been factored. But we're not factoring. This whole worksheet I want you to do using the formula. Are we good on 1 and 2? Okay, I want you to pick either 5 or 6 to do. I'll do one of those ones with you. Ooh, just pick a number. It doesn't matter. 5? Cool, thanks. You're gonna have to read it to me now. Equals 5. Thank you, ma'am. Okay, so we're going all the way down to number 5 here. What's your first thing when you solve any quadratic? It's got to equal 0. Does mine equal 0? How do I make it equal 0? Subtract your 5 over. Good. So then we'd get 6x squared plus 10x minus 5 equals 0. Then find your a, b, and c values. What's our a value of this quadratic? 6. And my b value? 10. And c is negative 5. X equals negative b, so negative 10, plus or minus the square root of 10 squared minus 4a c all over 2a. And then simplify the discriminant out. I used to make my students do that by hand all the time. Would you want to do that? Got really confusing. You have to hit the double arrow button then. I got 220 for my discriminant. Oh, what do you want it to do? Oh, don't push the square root button. Yeah, because I'm only doing the part that's underneath of it. I haven't done the square root of it yet. I see. So negative 10 plus or minus the square root of 220 all over 12. And then you have the two answers from there. Negative 10 plus the square root of 220 divided by 12. I got about 0.40 there. And then negative 10 minus the square root of 220 divided by 12. Negative 2.07.